A lean bulk is a calorie surplus, run slowly enough that most of the weight you add is muscle instead of fat. That's the whole idea. Everything after this is detail hung on that one sentence. The reason it needs a framework at all is that the body does not build muscle on demand. It builds muscle at a ceiling set by your training age, your genetics, and your hormones, and that ceiling is lower than most people want to believe. A man in his first serious year of training might add somewhere around 20 pounds of muscle if the food and the sleep and the programming all hold. In the second year, that number roughly halves. By the fourth or fifth year, a trained lifter is working hard for 2 or 3 pounds of new muscle across an entire calendar year. The ceiling does not care how much you eat. Once you've supplied enough raw material to build at that rate, every calorie past it has nowhere to go but fat. That's the fact the whole method is built around. If muscle can only arrive so quickly, then the surplus only needs to be large enough to cover that rate, plus a little. Anything beyond that is just you getting fatter on schedule. The dirty bulk, the seafood diet, the bulking season that ends with someone 40 pounds heavier and barely stronger, all of it comes from ignoring the ceiling and assuming more food means more muscle. It doesn't. It means more muscle up to a point, and then it means a longer cut later. So the framework starts with maintenance. Maintenance is the number of calories that holds your weight steady, and you can't build a surplus until you know it. You can estimate it from a formula, and the formulas will get you within a few hundred calories. But the honest way is to track. Eat at a consistent intake for 2 weeks. Weigh yourself most mornings under the same conditions, and watch the trend. If the weight is flat across those 2 weeks, that intake is your maintenance. If it drifts, you adjust. The scale is noisy day to day because of water and food in transit and sodium, which is why you watch the 2-week average instead of any single morning. People who skip this step are guessing, and a guess that's 300 calories too high turns a lean bulk into a slow, dirty bulk without them noticing for a month. Tracking all of this by hand gets old fast. That's what the lean bulk blueprint is built to do for you. The math and the targets handled so you just eat. The link's in the description. Once you have maintenance, the surplus itself is small. For most people, the right number sits somewhere between 200 and 300 calories above maintenance. That's roughly a 10% surplus, and it's deliberately modest. A bigger surplus doesn't make muscle arrive faster, because the ceiling is fixed. It only adds fat on top of the same muscle. The way you confirm the surplus is correct is by your rate of gain, not by the size of the number. A reasonable target is around 2 to 4 pounds of total body weight per month for someone past the beginner stage. A true beginner can run a little faster, maybe closer to half a pound a week, because their muscle ceiling is temporarily high, and they can actually use the extra. An advanced lifter should run slower, sometimes as little as a pound a month, because almost anything faster than that is fat. Protein is where the framework is least flexible. You want somewhere around 0.7 to 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight per day. For a 180-pound person, that's roughly 140 to 180 grams. The research clusters around the lower half of that range, as the point where more protein stops adding anything, but eating toward the top of it costs you nothing and gives you a margin, especially in a surplus, where appetite is rarely the problem. The protein matters more than the timing of the protein, more than the source of the protein, more than nearly anything you've heard people argue about online. Total daily protein, hit consistently across weeks and months, is the variable that actually moves. The anabolic window, the rule about a fixed amount per meal, the idea that you must eat within an hour of training. These are refinements at the edge of an effect that's mostly decided by the daily total. After protein, the rest of the food is fuel, and you have latitude. Set fat at around a quarter of your calories so your hormones have what they need, and let carbohydrate fill whatever remains. Carbohydrate is the fuel that lets you train hard, and training hard is the actual stimulus for the muscle. So on a lean bulk, the carbs are doing real work rather than just sitting there. None of this requires the food to be exotic. Rice, oats, potatoes, fruit, lean meat, eggs, dairy, whatever you'll actually eat week after week. The cleanliness in clean muscle gain refers to the rate of fat gain, not to some moral grade of the food. A lean bulk built entirely on foods you hate is a lean bulk you'll quit. Here's the part people skip, and it's the part that decides the outcome. The surplus is the permission to grow. The training is what does the growing. You can eat perfectly for a year and add almost no muscle if the training doesn't progress, because the body has no reason to build tissue it isn't being asked to use. The mechanism is progressive overload, which means that over time, the work you're asking the muscle to do has to go up. More weight on the bar than last month, or more reps at the same weight, or more hard sets across the week. The number doesn't have to climb every session. It has to climb over the span of weeks, and the surplus is what makes that climb possible, because building strength and size both run on the surplus you're carefully maintaining. The volume that drives this sits in a fairly wide band. Most muscle groups respond well to somewhere around 10 to 20 hard sets per week, spread across 2 or 3 sessions, with most of those sets taken close enough to failure that the last couple of reps are genuinely difficult. The exercise selection matters less than people think. Compound movements give you more work per set and tend to progress more cleanly, so they make a sensible backbone. But a muscle grows in response to tension and effort and progression, not in response to a particular brand of movement. A lifter who adds weight to a handful of basic lifts across a year, while eating in a small surplus and sleeping enough to recover, will outgrow almost anyone chasing novelty. If you'd rather not build your own progression from scratch, that's exactly what the Lean Bulk Blueprint is. Every set and every week mapped out so you're never guessing. Grab it below. Sleep belongs in the framework as much as the food does, even though nobody sells a supplement for it. The muscle is repaired and built during recovery, not during the session, and chronically short sleep blunts the hormonal environment that recovery depends on, while also wrecking the appetite, signals that keep a surplus controlled. Someone sleeping 5 hours and wondering why the bulk is going sideways usually has their answer and doesn't want to hear it. The unglamorous inputs, the sleep and the consistency and the months of unremarkable adherence are the ones doing the heavy lifting, and the supplements people obsess over are rounding errors next to them. Creatine is worth taking and genuinely does something. Almost everything else in the muscle building aisle is selling you the rounding error and charging for the ceiling you were always going to hit anyway. Monitoring is what keeps the whole thing honest over time, because a lean bulk isn't a setting you choose once. It's a number you defend every couple of weeks against a body that keeps adjusting. As you gain weight, your maintenance rises, which means the surplus you set in month 1 is smaller by month 3, and the rate of gain will quietly slow if you don't add a little food to keep pace. So you keep watching the trend weight. If you're gaining faster than the target, the surplus is too big, and you pull a couple hundred calories. If you've stalled for a few weeks and you're not a beginner anymore, you add a little. The adjustments are small and they're frequent, and that constant small correction is the difference between someone who stays lean across a long gaining phase and someone who looks in the mirror in March, wondering where the abs went. And there's a point where you stop. A lean bulk isn't meant to run forever, because the leaner you are, the more of each surplus pound goes to muscle, and the fatter you get, the more of it goes to fat. The practical version of this for most men is to bulk from somewhere around 10% body fat up toward 15 or so, and then stop and bring it back down before starting again. Past that upper range, the math turns against you. The surplus partitions worse, the fat comes on faster than the muscle, and you've effectively drifted into the dirty bulk you were trying to avoid. Knowing when to end the gaining phase is part of the same discipline as knowing how to run it. The lifters who stay lean year after year aren't the ones with better genetics. They're the ones who cut the bulk off before it turned on them. Everything in this video is already built into the Lean Bulk Blueprint. Stop guessing and start today. The link's in the description. None of this is fast, and that's the part the framework can't fix, only describe. A clean, lean bulk delivers a few pounds of muscle a year for anyone past their first stretch of training, and it delivers them slowly enough that you'll spend most of the time unsure whether it's working at all. The proof shows up in the long photographs and the slowly climbing lifts, not in the week to week. The people who succeed at it are mostly the ones who made peace with how boring the correct answer is. Set the small surplus, ate the protein, added weight to the bar, slept and waited. That's the framework. It's been the same framework for a very long time, and it works for the unremarkable reason that it's built around how the body actually adds muscle rather than how we'd prefer it did. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.